Story number 1. I'm not sure why this beautiful lake in Wisconsin with a long and beautiful hiking trail is called Devil's Lake. In 2003, one day I took 3 of my boys with me to go fishing and camping for one night at Devil's Lake. We camped on the side towards Highway 12. The side we're on tends to have fewer people compared to the north side of the lake. My 15-year-old son is a good swimmer and he loves fishing, so after he helped set up the tent, he took off to go fishing alone. I did tell him not to go too far. My 11 and 8-year-old boys were not into fishing yet, but they were playing around on the side of the lake while I was around waist deep in the water. It was around sunset when I was fishing and the fish were biting. It was getting a little cold in the water, so I came back out, went to my truck, and took off my waterproof fishing pants. I remember coming back out and seeing my 8-year-old standing a little further from where I was fishing earlier and calling for me to help him. The water was up to his stomach, so I was yelling at him not to move. I ran into the water, and the water splashed everywhere. Then I heard my 15-year-old son say, "Dad, look." I looked towards my right and saw my 3 sons walking towards me, and my 15-year-old son was holding a big fish up to show me. My 8-year-old son was with them too. I looked back towards the water where I saw my 8-year-old earlier, and no one was there. I stepped out of the water and realized that the area where I saw my 8-year-old should have been up to his neck or completely covered him. I knew what I saw, so that night I didn't say anything to my sons. But I tied a religious red string to each of them and told them not to go anywhere out of my sight. The next morning, we came back home early. The plan was to stay all day, but I forced them to come back home with me. I don't know what would have happened if I really ran into the water to where I saw my 8-year-old son. I wonder if people see things like that before they die from drowning and never get a chance to tell their story. I'm not sure why such a beautiful lake is called Devil's Lake. Story number 2. When we still lived in California back in the day, I used to go fishing at Los Banos with my older brother, Chu, and my brother-in-law. One evening we went fishing at O'Neill Forebay. It's the lake below San Luis Reservoir. We fished by Highway 152. I believe it was a Wednesday when we went, so there was no one fishing there but us. My brother-in-law parked his truck right where we fished. That night, around 11 p.m., it was getting cold and I was a bit sleepy. Chu and my brother-in-law were still fishing and enjoying their beers. I told them that I was going to sleep in the truck. I grabbed my stuff, took a leak, and went inside to sleep on the back seat of the truck. The truck was parked facing where we fished. Right around 4 a.m., I got up and needed to take another leak. I got out of the car, and I could see that my brother, or brother-in-law, was still up and fishing. I think it was my brother-in-law, but somehow I couldn't see his head. We had a lantern there by our fishing rods, so I could see him, but he was headless. It was early, so maybe I was just seeing things. I turned towards the trunk to take a leak because I didn't want my brother-in-law to see my wee-wee. Right then, I noticed that Chu and my brother-in-law were both sleeping in the trunk. I turned back to look at the headless man by our fishing rods, and no one was there. I got scared, so I went back inside the truck. When Chu and my brother-in-law got up at 6 a.m. to fish, I told them what I saw, and they actually believed me. We fished next to the highway, and that area used to have a lot of car accidents, and many people had died there. They called the area Bloody Alley for a reason. Story number 3. In 2008, I went camping and fishing with my uncle and his family at New Maloney's Lake. That evening, we were on my uncle's boat and doing some fishing. We were fishing along the narrow part of the lake, close to the beautiful Stevenot Bridge. Our boat was trailing along the edge of the lake. I remember seeing a light underwater. At first, I thought it was the reflection of the light on our boat, but when I looked at it again, it wasn't the reflection. Someone was under the water with a light on. I thought it was strange. I told my cousin, and we both looked at it. We thought someone was scuba diving at night or something. Fast forward to 2015, the drought in California was at its worst. The water level at New Maloney's lake was way down. Even some lakes in the area like Lake McClure were almost completely dried up. One night, my two buddies and I went back to fish at New Maloney's lake. We parked near the Stevenot Bridge and walked down to the edge of the lake. We only caught a few fish the first few hours we got there. However, by 11 p.m., the fish stopped biting altogether. It was getting a little cold in the area too. Then all of us heard a noise from the right side. It sounded like someone was digging dirt with a shovel. We could hear rocks rolling down into the water. We all looked towards our right and saw a man standing on the edge of the lake on the other side. This man was digging something, and he was wearing a headlight. We thought it was just another fisherman on the other side, so we didn't pay much attention to him. After a while, he was gone. Around midnight, we heard the sounds of someone digging again. We looked towards our right, and there was the same man digging something not too far from us. But this time, he was on our side of the lake. My friends and I thought it was strange. How did the guy get to our side? Even though the water level was way down, it was still very deep in the area. There was no way he could get to our side that quickly unless he jumped in the water and swam. We all got these weird feelings. We packed our stuff and climbed all the way back up to where we parked our car. Once we got to our car, we looked down, and the guy with the headlight was gone. We're not sure if the guy with the headlight was even human. He's probably a ghost. New Maloney's Lake is located in the site of the old gold rush town. I believe that in 2008, when we were fishing on the boat and I saw a light underwater, that must have been the light of that ghost. Then in 2015, when the water level was way down, the ghost was no longer underwater. Maybe that's why we saw him that night. He must be a man that died there while looking for gold, and even to this day, his ghost is still looking for gold. Story number 4. Back in 2014, my friends and I were planning to go fishing at Hume Lake. It's a beautiful lake that's high up in the mountains. I remembered it was late October, and I was working that day. I've been wanting to go fishing, so I called one of my friends to see if he wanted me to pick him up, but he said he was busy. Let's call him Jake. Don't want to use his real name for private reason. Jake told me that he wouldn't be able to make it. After work, I drove up to Hume Lake. It was a beautiful drive all the way up the mountain. When I got there, it was only me and no other fishermen or hikers. I fished for a while, and then my friend Jake called me back and asked for my location. He and his brother had just finished fixing their chicken coop, so they'd meet me at my fishing spot. I told him exactly where I was at. I knew it was probably going to take them at least an hour to get to Hume Lake. After a while, I saw a green light on the other side of the lake, flying up and down on the water's surface. It was a strange light that floated around on the edge of the lake for about a minute. Just then, a fish took my line. I let the fish drag my line until it got tired, before I reeled it to shore, as I heard a car pulling up where I parked my car. I got the fish in my hand. Then I looked back, and it was Jake and his brother. I saw Jake come out and he was smoking, so when he came out, he spat on the ground before looking at me. I showed him the fish and put it in the little ice cooler. I put some fish bait on my hook and tossed my line back into the lake. At this time, the little green light was gone. Then I looked back and I did not see Jake and his brother. Their car was also gone. I only saw my car parked up on the hill. It was weird. I was looking around, but did not see anyone. Just then, another fish pulled my line. I started fighting the fish again and got the fish to shore as I heard a car pulling up where I parked my car again. I got the fish unhooked, and then I looked back, and it was Jake and his brother. Again, I saw Jake come out, and he was smoking, so he again spat on the ground before looking at me. Then he said, "What kind of fish is it?" I told him it's a trout. Then I opened my ice cooler to put the second fish I just caught in, but there was no fish in the ice cooler. I got chills. I told Jake and his brother what just happened, but they did not believe me. To this day, I still don't know what happened. Did the green light I saw has anything to do with it? Was I dreaming? I still don't know and can't explain the event. Story number 5. This is my own personal scary fishing experience. Back in the summer of 2012, we went camping at Wishin Reservoir. When we got there, we set up our tents and took a short walk to the lake. The water was cold since it's all the way up in the mountains. My family hung out in the shallow water and tried to catch the baby fish for fun. After a while, my siblings asked me to go back with them because it's going to get dark soon since the sun is setting. I told them that I'll just stay for another 20 minutes. I didn't want to go back yet because sunset is the best time for fishing, and I'm not the only fisherman there. There are some big white rocks that go into the lake. All the way at the end of the rocks was an old man who was also fishing. I didn't want to go back with my family at that time, so they all took off along with our 2 dogs, Mossy and Benny. I was fishing and I kept looking at the old man to see what he's using as bait, because that was my first time at Wishin Lake. I don't know what the fish in the lake are after, in terms of bait. After about 20 minutes, our dog Mossy found her way back to me. I noticed that Mossy was alone. She came and sat next to me on the flat rock where I stood. Once it started to get dark, Mossy kept growling and barking at the direction of the old man. Back at camp, my family realized that Mossy went missing, so they all came looking for her. They found us just chilling in the same spot from earlier. My older brother wanted me to go back to our camping spot because it's already dark. I told them to take Mossy back because I still want to fish some more. I told my brother that there's an old man all the way at the end of the rocks, so I'm not the only one there. "What old man?" he asked. I got up and was about to point my finger towards the end of the rocks where the old man is, but no one was there. My brother said, "Earlier during sunset, we didn't see anyone at the end of the rocks. It's just you. You're the only one that's fishing here." I got scared, so I quickly packed my stuff and left with my family back to our camping spot. In order for the old man to get out of that spot, he'll have to walk past me. However, I did not see the old man walk past me. The old man also did not have a boat. I didn't know where he went. I hope he's a ghost and not a real person that slipped on the rocks and drowned. Story number 6. This event happened a long time ago when I still lived in California. I remember one day my wife and I went fishing with my friend George and his wife at O'Neill Forebay Reservoir, the little lake below San Luis Reservoir. It was during the weekday, so there were not a lot of people. We stayed on the west side of the lake where the camping site is. Around sunset, we set up our 2 tents and continued fishing. Around 9 p.m., George was still fishing with me, but our wives had already gone inside the tent since it was getting cold. George and I were drinking beers while fishing. Around 10 p.m., he told me that he was getting tired and going to bed. I told him that I wasn't tired yet, but if he was, then he should go get some sleep, and I'd see him in the morning. After that, George packed his things and went back to their tent. I was there fishing and enjoying the little cold breeze. Around 11 p.m., an older man walked by and started a conversation with me. I offered him a beer, and he took it. As we were drinking and having a conversation, The old man told me that he lived nearby and often came by to fish for striped bass. I found out that he was a Korean War vet during our little conversation. After about 5 minutes, he said it was getting a little too cold for his old bones, so he'd call it a night. He thanked me for the beer and left. It was getting a little cold and too breezy around midnight, so I decided to call it a night and packed up my stuff. When I got to the tent, my wife was already sleeping. The next morning, I woke up to my wife snoring. She was still sleeping in her sleeping bag and covered herself all the way to her head. I got out of the tent and went to the table to get a drink of water. As I was drinking water, I looked towards the lake and saw George, his wife, and my wife fishing on the shore. What the heck? I thought. I looked back inside the tent, and no one was in there. My wife's sleeping bag was flat. I swear she was still sleeping and snoring when I got up. Or maybe I drank a little too much last night. That day we fished until after sunset and left. As we were driving back, I told George about the old man last night. George was like, "Dude, do you know that there's a cemetery for Korean War vets nearby? It's just up the hill where we camped last night." What the heck? I thought. That sent chills throughout my body. However, it is true that there's a cemetery for Korean War vets up the hill on the side where we camped. I don't think the old man was a ghost, but I don't know. However, many fishermen did encounter strange paranormal activities in the area. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.